Conservatives are reacting to this leaked Supreme Court draft. It's potentially will overturn Roe versus Wade. And as they react to this, they're trying to convince themselves that liberals are being overly dramatic. They're upset. They're constantly talking about this thing. It's not that big of a deal. One particular Breitbart writer did have a full thread on the differences between the way libs may react to this news in the streets and the way that conservatives reacted to it when Roe versus Wade was passed back in the 70s. So Rebecca Mansour went through a few tweets just comparing the two different groups. The freak out you're witnessing from the left is very instructive. When Roe was handed down 49 years ago, pro-lifers didn't riot, didn't call for SCOTUS to be burned down, didn't threaten the lives of justices, didn't try to stack the court. She's got a thread, she lets us know. Pro-lifers, mostly Catholics at first, organized at the grassroots level. They planned an annual peaceful march on Washington. They created crisis pregnancy centers. They got involved in planning and electing politicians. They passed pro-life legislation. They worked within the system, that's in caps, of our constitutional republic to enact change at the ballot box and in the hearts and minds of their fellow Americans. It's actually pretty inspiring. She continued on this inspirational thread. Word of advice to the pro-choice crowd: violence won't help your movement. You should denounce violence in your movement, just as pro-lifers did. Work within the system to pass laws, just as pro-lifers did. We already did that, and see what happens later. It's your right as Americans to enact change at the ballot box is part of her thread. It was longer than that. There's instances in it where she's talking about all the wonderful things that pro-lifers did to get them to this point. So here's one of her pro-lifers and what they did. Watch this.
Today, the suspect appeared in court in Colorado so he could be formally charged in the Planned Parenthood killings. He was charged with 179 separate counts, including first-degree murder. He was not asked to enter a plea today, but he did say in open court today, quote, "I am guilty. There's no trial. I am a warrior for the babies." And that was just the beginning of this hearing.
This court has a duty to protect the constitutionality of this proceeding.
Protect the babies.
That's something that can be released.
Okay, I'm gonna give it out as is.
Yes, sir.
Could you add the babies that are supposed to be aborted that day? Could you add that to the list?
So the defense can see it for their purposes.
Seal the truth, huh?
But also protect the
Kill the babies. That's what Planned Parenthood does.
Peaceful activists like that guy, Robert Louis Deere, he's in court for some reason. I wonder why that is. It's because he killed 3 people at a Planned Parenthood. Details on what he did there. A gun battle erupted inside a Planned Parenthood center here. This is back in 2018, I believe. On Friday, when a man armed with an assault-style rifle opened fire and began shooting at officers as they rushed into the scene. The authorities reported that 3 people were killed, a police officer and 2 civilians, and 9 were wounded before the suspect finally surrendered more than 5 hours after the first shots were fired. A police official in Colorado Springs identified the man in custody as Robert Louis Deere. The shooting came at a time when Planned Parenthood has been criticized because of surreptitious videos made by anti-abortion groups of officials discussing using fetal organs for research. It transformed a shopping area near the clinic into chaos as snow fell and gunshots rang through the parking lot. I'm sorry, I believe this was 2013. And lastly, Adrian, before you jump in here, he's not the only one. He's not the only pro-life activist that did this peacefully and through legislation, because another tweeter here pointed out it wasn't just him. So since Roe was handed down 49 years ago, quote, pro-lifers in the US have committed 11 murders, 26 attempted murders, 4 kidnappings, 42 bombings, 667 bomb threats, 100 butric acid attacks. I'm not sure about those kinds of acid attacks. I don't do those things. 189 arsons, 663 anthrax bioterrorism threats, 25,000 plus acts of phone harassment or hate mail. Weird how that works, Adrian. You know what? You lib activists have to get yourself together and stop with all this violence and actually get on board and actually pass some legislation. Don't stack the courts. Don't change the way Supreme Court justices get approved. Do things the way we do it, peacefully and through the process.
It is It is just, it's egregious, the level of projection as well as revisionist history that goes on with individuals like this woman from Breitbart. The fact is that we've had the pro-life community engaging in all sorts of violence toward individuals that it really makes it hypocritical to even call them pro-life. The fact is that it is a form of violence in its own to require individuals to give birth and have babies, especially in a country with such a high maternal mortality rate and where you don't have any kind of social services systems that are sufficient to support individuals raising children. These people don't care about life whatsoever. What they care about is control, and predominantly they want to control women's bodies. And this is just another form of violence that our society exacts on women as a form of vengeance to ensure that there is subjugation among the genders we have in our society. It's pathetic. And we need to be real and authentic about it because the violence is coming from the pro-life side again and again, and we see that.
Now, I do want to point out, by the way, anytime there's protests or there's clashes in the streets over something that people don't like, well, no matter which end of the political spectrum it is or what those protesters are, many times violence does ring out. In fact, we did see it in Los Angeles last night. But the reasons behind that and how those things end up building to those fever pitch like that is a lot of times about the interactions that happen. Now, and also one group is fighting to stop people's rights, another is fighting to give people their rights, because throughout our history we've had to literally fight for rights instead of them being granted because humans deserve it. A few more of the headlines that you may have seen over the years from these peaceful, conservative pro-lifers. There was the assassination of George Tiller. And we remember Bill O'Reilly used his name over and over and over and over again. George Tiller, the baby killer. George Tiller, the baby killer. He said baby killer more times than you can count. Guess what happened? Someone killed him. You might want to kill someone who kills babies, according to Bill O'Reilly. The Kansas City Star had his headline here also as well. Woman who shot Wichita abortion doctor, bombed clinics in 1990s, released from prison. She was released and she did it in the 90s. Weird, that was a long time ago, but no, they never do these things. And also, there was an acid attack on 5 abortion clinics as well. From CBS News posted that. So as we go into this next story that talks about what happened, let's always remember, there's this weird I'm holier than thou approach that they have, which I think brings in more supporters of theirs. They're like, well, I want to be with the good guys, not the bad guys. And it's why Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday also tweeted that our God is bigger. Trying to figure out what your God has anything to do with this and why your God needs you to win victories for you. I thought he was all powerful. He doesn't need you, right? He's all powerful. Why does he need you to pass legislation in this country full of this entire world of countries to pass this law to help him? Now he's sitting comfortably before he was worried. It doesn't make any sense. Last thoughts before we move on to this next story, because what went down in LA last night?
It's extremely fortunate that we are not progressing, but we're regressing as a society and trying to fall back on these old times that did not serve us, and also that we know statistically as well as from research that do not serve us and keep us at least competitive on a geopolitical sphere. And it's unfortunate, especially because it means that we're going to lose more lives that clearly the pro-lifers don't value.
And then once those things happen, I wonder who they're gonna blame.